Out of Poland, where the government says it will deliver all of the weapons it had previously promised Ukraine. That's after Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki caused confusion when he said in an interview that his country had stopped sending arms. Diplomatic tensions between Warsaw and Kyiv are high because of a dispute over the sale of Ukrainian grain in Europe.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the UN General Assembly. Mixed with condemnation of Russia's aggression against his country were harsh words for European neighbours refusing to import Ukrainian grain.
And it is alarming to see how some in Europe, some our friends in Europe, play out solidarity in political theatre, making thriller from the grain. And they may seem to play their own role, but in fact, they are helping set the stage to a Moscow actor.
His words were seen as a direct criticism in Warsaw and drew a swift rebuke.
The statement that countries such as Poland are supporting Russia is completely inconsistent with reality. It is very painful for many people in Poland. Millions of Poles have helped Ukraine, helped Ukrainian refugees, and we are still helping them.
With Moscow blocking Ukraine's Black Sea ports, the route via Europe is vital for Kyiv to sell its main export. Poland is one of several Eastern European countries defying an EU ruling on lifting a ban on Ukrainian grain. With elections looming, the government is keen to avoid competition for Polish farmers. Stung by Zelenskyy's criticism, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki seemed to hit back, announcing that Poland would no longer send arms to Ukraine and instead focus on modernizing the Polish military. But experts say this is not a change of course for one of the biggest donors of military aid to Ukraine.
I don't think the Prime Minister wanted to say that Poland would no longer be involved in the transfer of weapons to Ukraine. He just, I think that what he wanted to communicate is to say that the weapons, the Polish weapons, will no longer be transferred to Ukraine because whatever the post-Soviet, ex-Soviet weapons Poland had on its disposal, they have already been transferred to Ukraine.
The massive upgrade to Poland's military is the result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a country seen in Warsaw as a bulwark against Russian expansionism. Despite the rhetoric, a strong Ukraine remains firmly in Poland's national interest.
Well, the Polish Foreign Ministry has since walked back the Prime Minister's comments. I asked our correspondent in Brussels, Rosie Burchard, whether this had just been a misunderstanding.
Well, we have had some clarifications from the Polish government. They've said that they will honour existing agreements to send arms and that Poland's role as a crucial hub for the transit of weapons from other donors into Ukraine will be unaffected. I've been speaking to one Polish official that said, well, simply Poland has already sent Ukraine what it had in stock. He said Poland is one of Ukraine's biggest supporters militarily and diplomatically. And he said there's a heated debate going on, but that we need to look at the bigger picture of Poland as a staunch supporter of Ukraine. Now, I think few would dispute that Warsaw has proved itself as a big political ally to Kyiv, but that official told me to look at the bigger picture. And when I look at the bigger picture, what I see here is that it seems that with these clarifications from the Polish government, there might not be any big change materially on the ground in terms of weapons to Ukraine, but it does seem that this is a shift in rhetoric and a sign of a deepening political rift between Poland and Ukraine, countries which are neighbours, which remain very much as allies, but do seem to be in the middle of quite a political showdown, a bit of a rocky period in their relationship.
Yeah, and they have been trading antagonistic statements for days now. So how did we get here?
Yeah, well, I think we need to rewind months in order to kind of look at how we got here. Now, as we heard a bit in that report, Poland has been at odds with Ukraine over the issue of grain exports. Now, when Russia first launched its full-scale invasion last year, that severely disrupted Ukraine's traditional Black Sea shipping routes for its exports of grain products. And so within that context, the European Union started to try and help Ukraine to look for alternative export routes through land, river and rail, out through the European Union through neighbouring countries. Now, there seemed to be a sort of unintended consequence of that, where Poland began complaining that Ukrainian grain was flooding its market and having a negative impact on its farmers, and that concern was echoed by several neighbouring countries. The EU then took some measures to try and, to ban temporarily the sale of Ukrainian grain in 5 neighbouring countries, but allowed it to transit on. Phil, that measure has now been lifted centrally by the EU, but Poland remains very unhappy about that, because Warsaw says the situation hasn't changed enough for its farmers, and therefore Poland has moved for a unilateral ban. It's announced that, and that has prompted some fierce criticism from Ukraine. Now, what you'll hear from Polish officials is that situation, that dispute is not necessarily the cause for this latest statement on Ukrainian weapons, that they aren't necessarily linked, but I think it's certainly important to look at it as part of the context. And a bigger part of the context here, not to be missed, is also those Polish elections looming on the horizon in just a few weeks' time. And remember, farmers are voters, and political parties in Poland are certainly competing for their votes.
Thank you for that, Rosie. Rosie Burchard in Brussels. Well, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is now in Washington to ask lawmakers for continued humanitarian and military aid. His visit comes at a crucial time as Democrats and Republicans battle over the budget. Republicans want to rethink US spending in Ukraine, while the Biden administration is pushing for an extra $24 billion to help Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression. The White House believes the Ukrainian president is the best messenger to keep that vital aid coming. Let's get more from our correspondent Stefan Simons in Washington. Welcome, Stefan. So what will success at the end of this Washington trip look like for the Ukrainian president?
Yeah, success for Volodymyr Zelenskyy and for Ukraine will be firm guarantees that the money will not stop coming, that the humanitarian aid will not stop coming, that ammunition and military gear will not stop coming. To the contrary, his goal here is, as you pointed out, really to bolster and to shore up support in the United States, to make sure that weapons, ammunition, humanitarian aid, money will still come to Ukraine and to the fight against the Russian aggressors in Ukraine. Now, as we speak, Mr. Zelenskyy is wrapping up a meeting with Senate leaders and with senators. Before that, he met with the House of Representatives leadership, Kevin McCarthy, as well as Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives. From now on, it will be shortly going to the White House for a meeting with President Biden. All of this as suspected to, again, shore up and bolster full support by the United States.
And is he likely to get what he's asking for?
There, it's where it's getting tricky and difficult to answer and very complex. I would say yes. Many people say yes, he will at the end get what he wants with a little bit more pain and hassle here and there, but he will get what he wants, meaning sustainably more money, more weapons, more ammunition, more everything which he needs or which Ukraine needs to fight the Russians. Now, why is that? Because there is no real alternative. At least that's what many experts say. That's what many politicians think. Not all of them, but a lot of them. There is no alternative for the United States or the Western world to helping the Ukrainians to fight the Russians.
It's interesting you said that this has become a complicated issue because US support for Ukraine's fight against Russia started off as a major bipartisan issue in Congress. And that's dwindled now. What happened?
Well, the political landscape has changed. Last visit of Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the United States was in December 2002. That was when Nancy Pelosi was still in charge. This was when the Democrats still had the majority in the House, not in the Senate, but in the House. Now they have it in the Senate, but not anymore in the House. The GOP, the Republicans are in charge, and it is a problem, a Republican problem. Specifically, why? Because Kevin McCarthy and, let's say, the moderate bloc within the House caucus of the GOP wants to help Volodymyr Zelenskyy and is affirming their willingness to keep help coming. But there is a sizable group of congressmen and politicians on the fringes of the GOP in Congress who say that's not necessary and we should stop, or the United States should stop paying and supporting Ukraine in their fight against Russia.
Right, so a brief word then on where the American public is on this.
Well, latest polls suggest that 55% of Americans say they really are not okay with spending more money for Ukraine. But take this with a grain of salt, because I think the United States here or the government and a lot of officials have a communication problem with the public. And that is that what the US has given to Ukraine so far is not even reaching 5%. As just an example, 5% of what the US is spending on military here in the United States in their budget. So that's, if you take a big step back and look at it from a broader perspective, that's peanuts. 5% of the military budget goes to Ukraine. I think the US politicians and administration has to do a better job communicating to the American people. And I think they're aware of this. More and more signs that they become aware of this.
Right.
There is no real alternative to helping the Ukrainians.
Thanks for that, Stefan. Stefan Simons in Washington.